What's up, everybody? Straw Hats Are Cool here, and we are back again with another video. Today we're going to be doing yet another market watch video. I'm going to try and do some things a little bit different today in order to again try and speed things up a little bit. I feel like oftentimes I kind of reiterate the same talking points in each video, so I'm going to try and just spread new information about the market, as well as just some little updates, but not dwell as much on cards that I talk about week after week, even though some of those cards might be the main talking points just because they are important in the current metagame and will continue to be moving forward. But I want to try and cut down on some of the repetition in each video, so try and do things a little different, speed things up a little bit. Before we get into today's video, just want to say thank you again to everyone who's supporting me. I know things have slowed down a little bit, but with summer coming right around the corner, I've got some big plans in order to adjust my upload schedule, and I have some plans for how I can sustain that schedule going into next school year. So I hope you all look forward to that. I'm excited to start doing some more with content creation again. But with that, if you're not already, please do consider joining the Discord if you have not done so already. Link for that will be down in the description. We do quite a bit of giveaways over there. We'll be doing a couple more pretty soon. We just gave away this starter deck 13, which I have not yet shipped yet, but we just gave that one away yesterday, and I should have probably 2 more of those to give away in about a week or so. I don't have them yet, so I'm not going to announce the giveaway just yet, but when I get my shipment, I've got a couple other starter decks coming in, so I'll be giving away a couple more of those, just like I did with that one. And then if you are buying any cards off of TCG Player, do consider using my TCG Player affiliate link. Link for that will be down in the video description somewhere as well. If you use that link, a small percentage of your purchase goes towards supporting me in the channel, and it really does help out a lot, so I would appreciate it. With all that said, let's go ahead and jump right into the market watch, starting things off with their chase cards. And because the chase cards don't fluctuate too much in price, I've got it pulled up like this so we can kind of see all the chase cards without flipping from page to page in order to help speed things up a little bit. So for manga Luffy, we're sitting about the same spot we were before, $3,500 ish. If I do recall, last week we did have one sell for about 3,000, but it still seems like this card is holding that $3,600 price point, with the cheapest listing right now being at $3,200, despite what it might show here. This one just has pictures, but it's from a reputable seller, so I'm sure it's a pretty safe purchase to make if you're in the market for a manga Luffy. For the gold stamped, again, I think this one has been like the most stable of all of them. It has dropped in the last couple weeks, as we mentioned last week, about 1,500 right now, but all in all, this one's been very stable. Very expensive card, but definitely been the most stable of the chase cards, I think, among the main sets. Shanks also been pretty stable, about $2,000. Yep, not a lot to say. We did have a sale on one moderately played for 700, so curious to see what the condition on that one is like if the seller receives it. I'm sure they will. Moderately played, but wonder what was up with that one. But hey, if you're just looking for something to have in a binder, I guess it is what it is. $700 still seems like a lot, especially considering it's moderately played, but hey, to each your own. Zoro's been dropping down pretty steadily. I think when we looked at it last week, it was still closer to $1,300, but since then, now it's all the way down to about $1,100, with some selling around $1,000. I don't know if those were Japanese listings or not. However, they were not. That was an English listing. So Zoro still continuing to drop pretty steadily. If you're in the market for a Zoro, I still might hold off, because just kind of looking at the general trend, we're dropping pretty considerably as time goes on. So I wouldn't be surprised if it continues to drop a little bit more. For Ace, again, I think this one has also been pretty stable after the big fluctuations we had kind of towards the beginning of the year. We saw it get up to like 1,500 at one point, but things have settled back down around $900. And if we take a closer look, we do have them selling at that price point. Did have another lightly played one sell for about 600, however. So if condition doesn't mean a whole lot, maybe if you're lucky, you can find a cheaper listing that way. Law also been pretty stable around $900. Again, this one started off a lot higher, but as time's gone on, it's kind of dropped off. And I expect as we get the reprints we should be getting for 05, there's a good chance this one comes down even a bit more later down the line once we get those reprints. Kind of the same deal for Kid. This one's been holding a higher price point. Well, I mean, it's dropped more, but considering where it started, I think this one's kind of about the same. I know towards the beginning, I think you could pick this one up for around 600 bucks. So it has gone up since then, but now it's pretty stable, kind of right up there, up with Law at about $800. And they are selling at this price point. We did again have another lightly played one, so kind of seeing in the last week there's been a lot of sales on cards that are in a little bit more used condition. Getting a pretty okay deal on those, I'd say, but as a whole, you know, if you're looking for near mint, it's looking about $800. Soga King about 500, same as before. Again, I think one of the less sought after manga cards for sure, definitely reflected in the price. But what is interesting is that the Manga Sabo, which I believe was right about the same price, if not a little less than Soga King last week, is now higher than Soga King by quite a bit at about $580. And we do see them selling at about $550. Don't see anything immediately selling at that $580 price point just yet. But kind of like I said, I think this is the one that had the most room to grow given the current climate of the game, just because it's a staple in pretty much every black deck. And those fiends who are looking to play max rarity decks, you know, this is a pretty, I don't want to say it's a safe pickup, but it's just because it's a staple in pretty much every black deck. If you plan on playing black decks at max rarity, might not be the worst investment, just because it's, you know, it's not just going to be used in one deck. It's got multi-purpose. You can play this in Gecko Moria, you'll play this in 07 Lucci, you play it in Black Yellow Luffy, all those decks that have black. This is pretty much a staple, 3 or 4 copies in all of those decks. That's it for our chase cards. Don't want to spend too much talking on these, like I said. So we're going to go ahead and jump into our main set cards for OP01. Starting thing off, I didn't talk about this last week, but for sealed product, kind of like I said before, not the biggest follower of sealed product. Your OP01 sealed booster boxes are pretty steady around 500. They were a bit higher in the past, but after they announced the reprints in January, they did drop a little bit. But from what I can tell, we're not getting like a mainstream large reprint for Romance Dawn. From what I can tell, a lot of LGSs will be getting a singular case of sets 1 through 4 sometime in the summer. But other than that, I think most of the 1 through 4 cards are going to be getting reprints in the form of new arts for the cards in the reprint set, which I believe we're getting in November. We're also supposed to be getting a new product they announced, I think sometime this past week, that's supposed to just include, I think, just a random assortment of booster packs from previous sets, and I believe that contains sets 1 through 4. I'd have to look at more specifics, but I know you can find it on the official One Piece card game website. I think it was somewhere under the topics for a new product, but maybe we'll look at that more in another video. So pretty stable around 500. I mean, I don't really think they're going anywhere. Probably not going up or down from here too much in anytime soon, at least. I could definitely see in the future, assuming the game continues to thrive, that they'll go up as time goes on. But I think for the most part, they're going to be pretty stable here for the foreseeable future. For your leader cards, again, not a lot changed. Both Zoro and Law are about $300 right now. I want to say that makes Zoro have gone up a little bit, maybe. I'm not too sure. I want to say Law was still a little bit more, but maybe Law's just come back down a little bit. Other than that, you know, your leader cards, I think for OP01, for the most part, they've been power crept out of the game. Still very hard cards to get and valuable to collectors, but in terms of playability, I don't think these cards are going to make a big wave anytime soon. Maybe Law if we continue to get more support, but I think just given the state of the game and how much removal there is, regardless of what support Law gets, unless it makes all your dudes immune to removal, I don't see this leader coming back into relevance anytime soon, unfortunately. For main set cards, I want to talk about Zoro. Now, really, this is just for the alternate art, again, for the max rarity fiends or collectors. Zoro is going up just a little bit, and I'm sure this is just due to the fact that we are entering the EB01 format next week, and Red Purple Law is definitely going to be one of the most formidable decks in the format after EB01 releases, and your Rush Zoro is pretty much a staple in most of those decks. Not always a 4 of, but most of the time you run at least 2 copies of this Rush Zoro. So while it hasn't been heavily played probably since 04, I want to say, back when Zoro was still, you know, running around pretty rampant, hasn't been seeing as much play for sure. But now we've got Red Purple Law coming back in the game. They like their rush cards. They also get the addition of Kid Killer and EB01, so just kind of got a lot of rush options that you can play off that leader effect, which is pretty powerful. So I don't know how much I think this card will go up from here, because it has been pretty stable around about $100, but with a little bit of hype surrounding that Red Purple Law deck, it has gone up just a little bit. Curious to see if this one continues to go up more as we get further into the EB01 format, especially considering the fact that Red Purple Law is also going to be a very formidable deck in the OP07 format as well. Sanji, not a lot going on with Sanji, and to be honest, this one's a little bit of a weird one that I'm bringing up because it hasn't been seeing any play from what I can tell in the current meta game here in the West or in the East in their format. But the only reason I'm bringing it up is because, like I said, Red Purple Law is going to be one of the more formidable decks in the upcoming format, and I think this is a potential tech choice you could have if decks like NL become too prevalent in the format, because a lot of times like those decks like NL, they're going to choose not to attack your life early game so they can get value out of cards like Gadatsu, who are able to remove one of your 4-cost characters just so long as they don't attack you in the early game. This is something you could play early just to take a life and kind of ruin their whole plan if that's what they're playing towards. So I definitely could see this being a choice card just depending on how the format goes. Very good card. Definitely catch your opponent off guard, I think, but I suppose only time will tell what's going on with their card. Like if you go second though, you can just play this down, and that's going to kind of incentivize them to start attacking you, because the following turn you could very easily just use this leader effect, rip a life, and sure, their Kadatsu could still hit something like the Sanji, but they're not going to be able to hit those 4-cost cards, which are your primary targets to play off of your leader effect with Red Purple Law. So just thought I'd bring it up because you know, it is cheaper than it was at one point in time. You know, not so long it was closer to $60 if I remember correctly, but now we're kind of back down to about $40. Very good looking alt, so might be worth picking up if you're, you know, planning to play Red Purple Law and you just want to be safe. But I don't think this is a card you need to pick up by any means, especially if not you're just like a low rarity player. You know, I think this is a good card to have in your collection, but don't think it's something you necessarily need to be picking up. Otama, again, with the topic of red purple law, very good 2k counter for red purple law, as that leader effect does have cost-based removal, Otama being a 2k counter, but also being a versatile character, which allows you to bring some higher power characters within range of your leader effect ability. Otama's not as much as it once was. You can see here it got almost to $7 at one point, but it's about $5 right now. It does have $1.22 shipping, but there are 4 copies of this one, so you could buy up all 4, kind of make the most of that shipping there if you don't have your Otamas. Going into the EBO1 format, Otama is definitely going to be a 4 of, I think, in all of your red purple law decks. But from what I can tell, going into the EBO1 format, you have more of a choice, as you do get the new 2k counter Sanji in his raid suit, which is a very powerful card for that red purple law deck. But for a lot of the decks I've been looking at in OPO7 over in the East, they're typically only running 2 copies of this card, so you may not necessarily need a full playset if you don't have them, but I definitely think Otama is just one of those cards that if you plan on playing red, you should definitely have a playset of in your collection. So if you don't have them, I might consider picking those up now, because I could see them going up even further as we get closer to the release of EBO1 and OPO7. As like I've said several times already, red purple law is one of, if not the top decks in those upcoming formats. Kazuki Momonosuke, while Yamato has been doing okay, a lot of times they are kind of running a Wano variant. This card has not been seeing a whole lot of play in the Yamato decks, and Yamato does kind of fall off going into EBO1, especially as NL kind of comes back pretty strong into the format going forward, and NL is probably Yamato's worst matchup, which kind of makes it pretty rough to pick up and play Yamato moving forward. However, going into OPO7, we do get some more Wano support, and there has been a Perona deck that's popped up and been doing pretty well at some flagships. Curious to see if that deck continues to pick up some steam as we see some more large-scale events over in the East. But for right now, it has won 3 or 4 flagship events from what I can tell, utilizing the Wano package and some cards that haven't seen a lot of play in the past, like Will You Be My Samurai, which isn't a card I ever would have thought of playing, but in combination with cards like Gecko Moria, you can play out Gecko Moria, another 2 cards, and then you can rest Gecko Moria and one of those other cards to use the Will You Be My Samurai to draw 2. And they're utilizing cards like Toy Soldier and the Hiyori from EBO1 that can play a 5 cost or lower Wano card from your hand by discarding the character. So I think the idea is kind of that, Gecko Moria is a 9k. You don't mind resting it the turn you play it, because chances are your opponent's not attacking into it anyway, and if they do, it's probably beneficial to you anyways. And then you can also rest the character, like I said, like the Hiyori or the Toy Soldier, because you're just going to discard those to use their effect anyways, which is a pretty powerful combination. So with cards, Gecko Moria already being a very card advantageous, just card in general, being able to get you multiple bodies on the board for the cost of just 1 card from hand, oftentimes replacing itself with the on-play effects of one of those cards you play. Having the Will You Be My Samurai is just another 1 cost option you can play to draw you some additional cards. Could be pretty threatening, but we'll have to see where the format goes. Izo, just another good 2k counter. Like I said, with the Perona deck, of course they're running this because they're running the Wano package. And you're also going to see this card run in decks like Bonnie and OPO7, as it is just one of the better 2k counter options in green. May be the best 2k counter in green as of right now. So, for an uncommon, it is relatively expensive. But maybe if you've been playing for a while, you've already got these, or you got them by participating in local events during O2, as I believe the Volume 2 tournament participation packs had the alternate art version of this Izo. And last card I want to bring up is Eustace Captain Kidd. I've talked about this one in the previous videos, but I kind of said that I think after EBO1 it kind of falls off. because Bonnie wasn't running it. But after looking at some more current Bonnie lists, they are running this card again. So if you do plan on playing Bonnie, this is a card you may want to keep in your collection after all. So kind of a mistake on my part. We were seeing Bonnie playing some different builds, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, but it seems like those builds have kind of fallen out of favor, and we're looking more towards kid builds again, which kind of makes sense, I think, with the leader ability of Bonnie being able to rest your opponent's attackers just for the cost of 1 Dawn every turn. Makes it especially difficult to clear a card like Kid. That's for OPO1. We're going to briefly talk about OPO2. Really, there's not many big talking points, so we're going to get through this one pretty quick. For sealed product, your Paramount War sealed product is actually going up again. Again, kind of like I said with OPO1, it did drop back in January once we got the confirmation we'd be getting some reprints. But as I said for OPO1, I don't think we're getting like large scale reprints for OPO2, if reprints at all. Like I said, I do think some LGSs will be getting 1 case of sets 1 through 4 over the summer, from what I've been told from my LGSs in the area. We'll just have to wait and see on that. It's not going to be a large scale thing where we're getting a lot of product for these sets. And I do think set 2, while there's not a lot of talking points today, there are a lot of just good cards in the set. From a collector's standpoint, especially, I think it's one of the better sets to pick up. In terms of leader cards, again, nothing really to speak of. Most of these leaders are power crept out. You could see some people messing around with Ivankov a little bit again, going into EBO1 because they do get some support. I don't think it's enough to boost them into relevance in terms of competitive play, but you might see some people messing around with it at your local game stores. So you could see a slight increase in the price of Ivankov, but because it's not going to be extremely viable in the meta, I doubt we'll see much of a price increase. Potentially you could see Z go up in OPO8. I do think some of the new cards coming for Animal Kingdom could also benefit a leader like Z, but that's probably just a copium in me because I really like this leader and would like to see it do well someday. But that's it for our leader cards. I just want to talk about Ace again because we can see that our alternate art here has gone up quite a bit more in price again. It was about $65-70 last week, and we're up to $80 now. For your alternate art, your regular SR is pretty stable at about $12 right now, but in terms of other SRs in the game, there's not a ton of listings left, so I could potentially see this one going up more in price again. But I think this is largely dependent on what red purple law builds end up doing well over here in the West. We'll have to see if the red purple law players over here opt to play the Ace in their deck. I think if they do, and those decks see large amounts of success, we will see this card to continue to go up even further. So if you want to be safe and you're planning on playing red purple law, I would definitely pick up at least a couple copies of Ace. Like I said, I do think it's really good into the mirror. I said this in the last video. So with red purple law potentially being the most represented deck moving forward, you're probably going to face the mirror quite a lot, so this might be a good inclusion for that deck. But again, like I said, we'll have to wait and see what builds end up being successful over here, as I think that is going to be the biggest factor in determining whether the price of this card goes up or down. Just kind of your friendly reminder that if you want to play film in EB, it's a pretty solid deck, but kind of going into OP7, the deck more or less fades out, so probably not the best long-term investment in my opinion. But these cards may potentially get a little more expensive going in EBO1, especially if we start seeing Uta doing well in the kind of early events for the EB format. But more or less, honestly, if you're sitting on these cards, I might just hold them, and if the deck does well in EB, you'll probably see these go up a little bit, and I just sell them, because after that the deck falls off pretty hard. I did see a film Bonnie deck in 07 that I think maybe won a flagship or got second place at some larger event. But I think for the most part, these aren't cards you're going to be needing moving forward, and you'll probably be okay without them. And again, just kind of, again, friendly reminder for your Navy cards, specifically your Kuzan and Borsellino. Unless you plan on playing Gecko Moria moving forward, I'm not sure you need either of these cards right now. So if you're sitting on these cards, I think now is probably a good time to sell them, because Lucci doesn't run Borsellino or Kuzan in 07. You know, Gecko Moria still runs a couple copies of Kuzan, maybe Borsellino. But for the most part, your black decks aren't running these anymore, especially with Sakazuki getting banned and that being one of the main decks that utilize these cards. I think the prices on these cards are going to drop pretty significantly. We are seeing Borsellino run in that new Perona variant that I'd mentioned a little bit ago, but outside of that, neither of these cards are seeing much play in any of the black decks that are relevant in the upcoming formats. So definitely something to consider if you are holding copies of these cards. I really do think it might be a good time to sell, especially because I'm sure these are cards that are going to get reprint in the reprint set we should be getting in November. That's it for OPO2, so we're going to jump into OPO3. And similar to OPO2, not a lot to talk about for this one, but we're still going to talk about some of the cards real quick. For your sealed product, Pillars of Strength, again, dropping a little bit as well. I think especially with Big Mom Pirates potentially kind of fading out going into the OPO7 format as your NL deck kind of takes over. A lot of the cards in this set are losing value, which may be contributing to the fact that the overall price of your booster boxes are losing a little bit of value as well. In the grand scheme of things, they haven't dropped too much. They were at their kind of peak. It looks like they were about 270 and we're about 250 right now. So, you know, if you chose to hold on to your product, probably still not too upset about that, especially if you bought them back when they were more around MSRP than they are right now. But yeah, like I said, I'm probably not the guy to talk to about sealed product, but just kind of sharing my thoughts. I would not buy sealed product like this, but if you're an investor who bought a bunch of sealed product, I'm not saying you should sell, but again, kind of like I said with OPO1, I think for the most part, your sealed product right now is probably going to be pretty stagnant. So, you know, if you're in need of the money and you invest in these, might be okay to just make your profit now, rather than holding out for the future and hoping that it will continue to get better. I think over time it definitely could, but I think it's entirely dependent on how successful the game continues to be. The game's doing really well right now, but I definitely think we might be losing some of the player base just due to how Bandai has been handling some of the distribution side of things. So we'll just have to wait and see. I really hope the game continues to do well, but only time will tell. For your leader cards, not much to talk about, but I do want to mention that Katakuri is dropping, which is something that I speculated last week due to the fact that, you know, NL's still going to have its run in EBO1, but after that, going into PO7, NL just kind of invalidates Katakuri as a yellow deck because NL can just do everything yellow wants to do, but a little better than Katakuri. With the addition of cards like the Secret Rare Ace and OPO7. I'm sure you could still play Katakuri if he's your favorite leader in the game, but I think more or less most of those yellow players are going to be jumping ship and picking up NL as the yellow deck of choice for the OPO7 format. So I don't think this card will drop down too much more in price. Maybe we'll see it kind of match about Nami's price right now, get a little closer to 180. But Katakuri is still a very popular character. It's an older set, so I'm sure it will hold its value. But with him kind of falling out of favor in the current metagame, I do think we might see this one drop even just a little bit more in price. For your wanted cards, not a lot's changed again. Potentially we see Kid go up a little bit more if Bonnie starts seeing more success. Well, Bonnie seems like a solid deck in OPO7 though. I definitely think it's probably closer to that tier 1.5, tier 2 maybe. I think it's looking like NL, Law, and Yellow Luffy are probably the top 3 decks of the format, but that could always change over here, depending on, you know, what new tech choices or potentially even new leaders people start messing around with and find viability with. But for the most part, I think Bonnie's a solid deck, but I don't think that even with the Bonnie leader that it's going to affect the price of this card too much. I think these cards are pretty stagnant right now, but the Luffy, if you're a collector, might be a good time to pick it up because we have seen this card be quite a bit more expensive in the past. Just quickly going to touch on the yellow stuff again. If you don't have your Katakuris and you want to play yellow, I'd pick these up now because NL is going to be your yellow deck of choice moving forward. And this is, I think, like a mandatory 4 of almost. I think this is arguably the best card in the deck. Being valuable as not only a removal option, but also as a card that can put your own characters back in life, which can be extremely valuable for NL, especially if you get down to 0 life. Being able to throw this down and essentially resetting your leader effect is incredibly powerful. And then it's just an 8k body after that, which is great. Pudding, I'm sure, is just going to hold its value and potentially could go up significantly more if we see the right support in OPO8 for purple yellow pudding. But I think I said this last week, Cracker, Perospero, these guys are probably going to fall off, especially as Katakuri falls out of relevance. So like we're seeing with the Katakuri leader, I imagine we'll see these cards dropping quite a bit as well. Big Mom's probably going to hold its value just because you're going to have the pudding players, pudding being a waifu, and then just the fact that I think a lot of newer players or more casual players especially gravitate towards yellow deck. Being able to ramp into a card like Big Mom feels kind of cool. So definitely think this one's going to hold its value just because we've got the anticipation for purple yellow pudding. But other than that, I think your Perosporos, your Crackers, those things are going to drop off. So you might want to sell those now if you've got them. But your Katakuris, Big Moms, and Puddings, I imagine those ones are going to either hold their price, if not go up a little bit as time goes on. And again, just kind of a friendly reminder that while, again, I think kind of similar to Bonnie, OPO7 Lucci is not a tier 1 deck. Maybe tier 1.5, tier 2, definitely a strong deck. I also just think that OPO7 is not a totally solved format yet. So kind of depending on where things go, I could see something shaking up the format. Maybe it ends up helping Lucci in the long run, but we'll just have to wait and see. But a lot of these alts especially are going up in price. And if you plan on playing Lucci and you don't have your Kakus, they're only $3 right now. I'd definitely pick it up because as we get closer to the release of OPO7, I'm sure these will go up just a little bit more. Your Isho alternate art and regular SR are going up a little bit again as well. I think this is proving to be one of the best cards into the Black Yellow Luffy matchup, which from what I can tell is one of, if not the hardest matchup for the mono black decks. So Isho's proven to be a pretty valuable tool in that matchup. So we could potentially see this one going up even more in price, especially if Black Yellow Luffy continues to prove its worth in the OPO7 format. But other than that, that's it for OPO3. Like I said, not a lot to talk about, but just wanted to kind of reiterate some things just in case you missed it in the last one. So let's go ahead and jump into OPO4 for sealed product. OPO4 is going up, and this makes sense to me because I think on release OPO4 was pretty underwhelming with the current metagame. The cards that were released in OPO4, they didn't do a lot for any of the best decks like at the time, which were Newgate, Zoro, Law. Those decks did not benefit a lot from OPO4. But as time's gone on, I think a lot of these cards have appreciated pretty well, especially on the yellow side of things, with cards like Yamato and Capone especially. And then you've also got your cards like Sabo, which now that black is a very dominant color in the game, is one of like I mentioned earlier with the manga, just one of the staple cards for pretty much every black deck. So I think with just overall set value appreciating very well, your sealed product is continuing to go up as well. So not a lot to say here, but I think it makes sense. If you're sitting on sealed product that you want to hold, I think this is the set to hold. I think this one still has the most wiggle room to increase in price. As far as your leader cards go, not a lot to speak of here. I want to say this is the cheapest set of leader cards just due to the fact that not many of them have been especially relevant, unfortunately. You know, Queen, Dofi, they had their run. Rebecca had her run in OPO4. Crocodile's getting some support, but I don't think it's going to be enough to affect the price on this one too much. And then like Isho and Vivi, you know, they're just kind of there, which is a bit unfortunate, but it is what it is. So nothing really to speak of for your leader cards. I don't think there's ever been a lot to talk about with the leader cards in OPO4, as in terms of leader cards, definitely the most underwhelming set for those. For SPs, things are pretty good. Newgate's coming down a little bit. I want to say last week this was closer to $60 right alongside Law. It's coming down a little bit, so if you want to pick up a copy of SP Newgate, might be a good time to do it. Other than that, not a lot's changed. Bo is still at your top of your SP cards, and I'm not too sure why, other than the fact that it's waifu, but $130 does seem even a little bit expensive for a waifu SP in my opinion, especially given that this is not a card that sees any amount of play. We look at cards like SP Rebecca, which are holding about the same price as Boa, but seeing substantially more play. Doesn't quite make sense to me, but it is what it is. Briefly want to talk about your Doflamingo and Corazon cards. Corazon was one of the cards that was starting to see play in Bonnie in OPO7. There were a lot of builds that were running kind of a Don Quixote Supernova hybrid package, and they were also running this Rosinante, as in EBO1 we get the Cavendish SR, and in OPO7 we get the Bonnie SR, which are both 5-cost green characters that can be played off of Rosinante's on-play effect, which is pretty good. So a lot of people are messing around with that, especially with cards like Cavendish. Being able to play 8 Dawn, play a Cavendish, get 2 back, effectively makes it a 6 Dawn play, which is really quite good in my opinion. But as I mentioned when we were talking about Eustace Captain Kidd for EBO1, it looks like that build is taking precedence now. So your Corazon builds, while they were seeing a bit of success in the early weeks of the OPO7 format, looks like they're kind of falling out of favor right now. So feels kind of bad if you invested in these in the hype. Generally I would say try not to do that though, because oftentimes like we're seeing here, it will be the case that the hype doesn't necessarily meet the expectations in the end. So hopefully you didn't buy these when they were too expensive, as things are dropping down now. Still think it'll be a fun build to mess around with, but if you're looking to play at the top level, I don't think you're going to need your Don Quixote Rosinante. Kind of similar with Dofi, this card's not been seeing a whole lot of play moving forward. You know, there were some people messing around with it in Bonnie. You know, we had our people messing around with it in Perona in the current format, but more or less, you know, as good as this card is, it just doesn't, it's a little too hard to play at times. Your opponent can play around it. So fortunately, Doflamingo just doesn't seem like it was all it was cracked up to be in the beginning of the game, which is unfortunate because I think it's a really cool card. Definitely annoying to play around, but in the current metagame and with the current leaders we have, doesn't quite fit any of them yet. But over time, I think this is a card that could come back into play. But as of right now, we're seeing the price on this one drop just because it's not really seeing any play in the upcoming decks. From what we can tell, at least, it's not seeing a lot of play in Bonnie. I don't know if the new Perona builds were playing this. I don't think they were, but you know, maybe someday it'll go back up again. Just want to bring up Sabo again. I know I brought it up last week, but the SR has gone up about $5 more again. That's for a lightly played copy. Your near mint copies, not too much more, about the same price actually, about 25 bucks now, which is already more than they were last week. But with the release of Starter Deck 13, Black Yellow Luffy's a very powerful deck that gets a lot of value out of this card. I would argue it's the best card in that deck. It's gonna see play in Lucci, still sees play in Moria, and those are both tier 1.5, tier 2 decks in OP07. Don't see the price on Sabo going anywhere until we get some form of reprint for it. Alternate art sitting strong, about 70 bucks. And as you can see with both your alternate SR, or your alternate art, and your regular SR, not a whole lot of listings left, which means there's definitely still room for these ones to go up if they continue to sell out. So just something to keep in mind. If you don't have them, probably grab them now, but hopefully you already picked these up a couple weeks ago when they were still closer to 15 bucks. Then again, for our yellow cards, to kind of reiterate, if you don't have Yamatos, they're only 5 bucks right now. NL doesn't totally take off until OP07, so it might be a good time to prepare now, because I definitely think these are cards that could go up a lot more. Especially over here in the West, I think we like our yellow decks a little bit more than they do in the East. So I think NL may be one of the most popular, if not the most popular decks in the OP07 format, kind of like we've seen here. Katakuri was a big deck in the West for OP06, but definitely not as big as it is over here in the West. And with a lot of those Katakuri players likely moving to NL, I think it might be a good time to invest in your Yamatos if you've not done so already. Of course, Capone is a good card as well, for all your yellow decks, especially ones like NL that heal a lot. And then unfortunately Sanji, I definitely think is another one of those cards that's just, it had its time, but now it's fallen out of favor. Still not a bad card, but with all the removal in the game, it's difficult to get any value out of it. So the NL decks aren't running it in OP07. They got to make room for the new stuff. So there aren't really any decks that are running Sanji in the current formats from what I can tell, but maybe in the future he'll come back up again. But definitely don't think you need to be worried about your Sanjis. But your Yamatos, on the other hand, definitely think you're going to want to pick those up if you plan on playing yellow moving forward. That's it for OP04. Let's talk about OP05. In terms of sealed product, this one's fluctuated quite a bit. We can see it went down and now it's coming back up a little bit. I have seen OP05 popping up in some local game stores again, and as well as a more supply of OP06, which is good to see. But unfortunately, most LGIS have marked them up so that they're more similar in price to TCG player. So $225 is still too much for a booster of OP05, especially if you look at the price of singles for OP05 right now. This set, in terms of value on singles, tanked pretty hard outside of, your mangas and your Oda side Luffy. You still got the chase cards, which is why people are buying. But in terms of set value, this one is not appreciated very well right now. So definitely would avoid buying a sealed product for OP05 if you plan on opening it. As far as leaders go, Sakazuki and Luffy, like I said before, they dropped pretty hard. Your 3 down here, never really saw any play, all about 25-30 bucks. Sakazuki's getting banned. If not, I'm sure this would still kind of be up there with NL, but he's getting banned in a month or so. So Sakazuki's days are numbers, and I'm sure a lot of us are thrilled for that. And then NL still being relevant and will continue to be more relevant going forward. If you want an alternate NL leader, I would probably pick it up now. The price, if you look at it, has more or less just been dropping slowly, and now it's kind of evened out about $80, which is where it's settled. But as I've been saying, with NL being a very formidable deck moving forward, definitely could see this one going up quite a bit more again, maybe even back up to $100 where it was when NL was kind of in its prime during the OP05 format. As far as SP goes, not a lot to change here. Nami is still your most expensive. Yamato, NL, right, you know, kind of your runner-ups at about the same price. And there's the other three who, you know, just are kind of there. These cards look great. If you're a collector, I definitely recommend picking them up. Don't really see the price on any of these moving too much anytime soon. Maybe you could see NL going up a little bit more for the EB format because Sakazuki will still be running around, which is, I would say it's an even matchup for NL, but I do think this is kind of one of the best cards you can use in that matchup. So, you know, for the people who want to bling out their NL decks in EB, maybe this is something you might want to pick up. Baby Fives tank pretty hard in price as well. Like I said, that those Don Quixote builds for decks like Bonnie kind of fallen out of favor now. So I think we're seeing that reflected in the price of cards like Baby 5 because they're not seeing much play anymore. We saw this one almost at, you know, 45 bucks, and it's fallen pretty hard, about half the price that it was not you know, not too long ago. Just about, you know, a month ago it was still 40 bucks. So you know, if you want your Baby Fives and still plan on playing it, hey, probably a good time to pick them up. Could see them going a little bit lower, but you know, I think $23-24 for Baby 5 is a fair price to pay for an alternate art searcher. And who knows, maybe it'll come back into relevance again. For your purple stuff, just quickly want to bring up Kid again. I brought it up last week, but with Red Purple Law again being a very formidable deck, this is a card you're going to want to run 3 to 4 copies of in your Red Purple Law deck. I don't know if it's going to go up too much more, just because, like I said, the overall set value for OP05 is pretty bad right now, to be honest. But you know, there are only 40 listings left, so if we see Red Purple Law really taking off like we expect it to, could see this one going up a little bit more. Kind of the same dealio for your SR, though there are a lot more listings for this one. I also just wanted to bring up Zorojoro, as I have been seeing this come up in Red Purple Law decks as well. Some decks are running 2 copies of this one. I really think you're just playing this because the deck really wants to go second so that you can start ramping, but this is something you can play on turn 2 going first if you are forced into going first. That can help you ramp an additional Dawn, so that you don't have to wait an additional turn necessarily like you would otherwise. So definitely something to consider. Not sure you need it, but if you want to be kind of set for all the options you might have for Red Purple Law, might be something you want to pick up. For your black cards in OP05, you know, Rebecca's still obviously a very good card. Gonna be seeing play in OP07 Lucci for sure, but with decks like Sakazuki getting banned, there are less decks that are playing this one. I don't know if Gecko Moria runs this one in OP07. I'm not sure they have room for it, because they kind of need to adjust their whole build so that they have a chance against Black Yellow Luffy. So I have to look more into that one, but as good as both these cards are, they do start seeing a little bit less play. Of course, Lucci is going to be a staple in the 07 Lucci deck, but outside of that, you know, with Sakazuki gone, definitely seeing a lot less play. Probably still going to see it play in Gecko Moria as well, but again, you might play less copies of this card in OP07 than you're playing now, even EB, because you kind of need to adapt your you know, adjust your deck so that it has a fighting chance against Black Yellow Luffy. Gadatsu is actually down a little bit, which is a little bit surprising to me because I think this is still a very good card moving forward, especially for decks like NL. Really helps out in your Red Purple Law matchup. But like I said, maybe some builds will start adapting and playing your 2K counter Sanji to kind of play around this one. But I think for the most part, very good card for NL. Still one you're going to want to play in your NL deck. So could see it going up a little bit more once, you know, we're in the thick of the EB01 format going into OP07, as NL will start to take off a little bit more. That's it for OP05. That leaves us with just one more main set for OP06. Sealed product, about 170 bucks right now. Your sealed prices are dropping quite a lot. We did see around the start, it was around 220 bucks, I want to say, is what a lot of stores were selling their boxes at, which is pretty disgusting. And Even 166 is still a lot, but definitely a lot better than it was. So happy to see that. I hope the prices continue to drop. For your leader cards, Yamato still kind of holding the front line as your most expensive. Then you got Perona and Reiju, Moria, Uta, Hody. We're seeing Moria drop down a little bit because, like I said, while it's still a viable deck in the OP07 and EB01 format, definitely does take a bit of a hit with the introduction of Black Yellow Luffy. Perona's down quite a bit, but if we see this deck that's been popping up here and there over in the East continuing to do well, I could definitely see Perona increasing a little bit more in price. So we'll have to wait and see where that goes. I wouldn't be surprised if Yamato drops a little bit more though, because like I said, this deck has a hard time keeping up in the future formats, especially with NL making a bit of a comeback and being probably this deck's worst matchup. That's it for our leader cards. For your SPs, like I said, kind of surprised that Boa's as much as Rebecca right now. I think they're both the same price, especially considering Rebecca sees substantially more play. However, like I said in OP05, it is seeing less play, especially once Sakazuki leaves the format. Of course, Linlin, like I said with the OP03 Linlin, I expect this one to hold its price, if not go up, just because of the hype for Purple Yellow Pudding. But I think we'll kind of get confirmation on whether or not we need to be prepared for that deck here in about probably 2 months, once we'll be in the thick of the OP08 format over in the East. Buggy and Missile Sunday about 75, and then Sugar and Porcelina still being your lowest, which makes sense. So yeah, it is what it is for your SPs. If we ever see event-based red decks come back, I think Buggy has the most room to grow, just because unlike all the other cards that have SPs in OP06, this is the only alternate art for Buggy. All these other cards have different alternate arts. Treasure Rare Nami, this card just continues to fall and fall and fall in price, which for me feels kind of bad because I pulled 3 of them, but hey, it is what it is. Not the best looking card out there. Curious to see what Treasure Rare we end up getting for OP07, as it seems like the Treasure Rare cards are kind of region specific. So China's been getting different Treasure Rare cards than we have over here. So definitely curious to see what we end up getting for OP07 if we end up getting another Treasure Rare, which I think we probably will. Shiraya has popped off pretty hard, and this is another red purple law deck. It's another card for the red purple law deck. Personally wish I'd picked up one more copy just so I had a playset. Personally, I don't think I'd run more than 3 in my red purple law deck, but I like having the cards just to be safe. But this one's pretty much doubled in price from where it was a couple weeks ago. So it is what it is. I don't know if this one will continue to go up, but it is definitely a staple in red purple law moving forward. And with that deck being potentially the best deck in the format, I would imagine this one kind of settles around $30. Might be a little bit of hype right now, and we could see it go up even a little bit more, but I think it's probably going to settle around 30. So if you want to wait a little bit, I would. But if you're skeptical and think it might continue to go up, which it definitely could, I might just want to pick them up now. What do we got next? Your green stuff. Hody Jones, not seeing a tremendous amount of play right now. However, in a lot of the Bonnie decks, this is a card they run as well, as is Zoro. You also see Zoro pop up a little bit in some of those Perona decks. While neither of those decks are, tier 1 best deck in the format, if you plan on playing green, they're definitely cards you're going to want to have. And we are seeing the price on your Secret Rare Zoro already start to go up just a little bit. So if you want to be on the safe side and don't have your copies of Zoro, and you like playing green, I think I would probably do it now, because it probably will just continue to go up a little bit in price. It is a good card when it sticks, but it can be a big ask at times, especially in a format riddled with decks like Sakazuki. But I think it gets a little harder to remove this card in future formats. and it is also just kind of a matchup specific card. Unfortunately, yellow does kind of get out to it with Rygo in EBO1, but it can be hard for a deck like Red Purple Law to remove, so you know, definitely just something to consider. Reiju, I'm mostly concerned with the regular SR here. Your alternate art's been pretty stable around 80 bucks, but with Red Purple Law again being a very heavily represented deck, Reiju is kind of one of the staples for that deck, as it fixed one of the deck's biggest weaknesses in the past, which was that you gas out pretty quick, because oftentimes you're playing 2 cards per turn, one with your Dawn and then one using the leader effect after you've rested your Dawn. Reiju just kind of helps you refill your hand. You on play to draw 2, really good. And while this card is kind of restricted that you need to have less Dawn, with your leader effect you're always going to have less Dawn in your opponent, so you're almost always going to be able to get this effect off, as long as you're at 5 cards or less in your hand, which you probably will because you're playing lots of cards. You flood the board pretty quick with the deck. For that reason, I could see this one going up a little bit more, and that's just because, like, the next card we're gonna talk, maybe not the next card, but like we saw with Hiyori last week for Black Yellow Luffy, you know, that card went up pretty significantly in price, so I could potentially see that happening with Reiju as well, but I think it probably already would have gone up if it was going to, especially with 133 listings. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But I think if you're gonna play Red Purple Wall, just go ahead and pick these up now, not risk the chance that they're gonna go up, because I don't think they're gonna get much lower than this. Gecko Moria, your alternate art's actually coming down, as is your regular SR, just a little bit. And like I said, you know, your black decks are still very good, but again, Sakazuki's leaving the format, so that's one deck that was running this that won't be anymore just because you can't. And it is a staple in Black Yellow Luffy, but your other black decks, like I said, I think they're kind of sitting around tier 2 right now. So while Lucci and Gecko Moria are still good decks, they're not the best. And you know, if you're playing this game at a high level, you want to be playing the best deck that you can to have the best chance possible to do well. So I think for that reason, we're seeing this card drop a little bit in price, but still definitely one of the best cards in the game. And honestly, I think it might be a good time to pick these ones up, because I don't think they'll get much lower. Maybe we're anticipating a ban. I could definitely see this card getting banned in the future, so we'll just have to wait and see what ends up happening with that. And then lastly, for our yellow stuff, like I said, Hiyori really kind of took off with the release of Starter Deck 13. Staple card for Black Yellow Luffy, can not only help you set up your life if you want to use one of the little kids from the deck, but also just allows you to take a life if your opponent's trying to starve you for resources and preventing you from getting to 0 life. You can just take a life and not put anything back, which can be pretty helpful at times if your opponent's not attacking you to get you down to 0 life. Other thing I wanted to mention is just that the Nami's tanking pretty hard. I still think Nami's a pretty solid card, and it's Nami, so if you don't have a Nami and you want to pick one up, I think now is probably a pretty good time to do it. There are 85 listings though, so I could see this one potentially going down even a little bit more, as that is a lot of listings for an alternate art. Even cards like Momo we see less listings for, and that's really something I do think you need to take a look at when kind of evaluating where you think the price of a card's going to go. So lots of people are trying to get rid of their Namis right now, which leads me to believe that this might even go down a little bit more in price. So if you're wanting to pick up some Namis, I'd definitely keep your eye on this one. But I think it's another good card and one that sees a lot of play in NL decks. You do have to keep in mind though that in OPO7 this card does get an SP, and a lot of times that is the preferred variant for max rarity decks. But that's it for OPO6. Still about an hour right now, but I think we're making better time than in previous videos. For your starter deck cards, you know, your black stuff's still pretty expensive, but I would definitely say sell your greater options now. People are still buying them, and this card gets banned in a month or so going into OPO7. So going into EBO 1, if you don't plan on playing black, just get rid of these cards now. Make yourself a little bit money. The card get banned. You don't need it anymore. Could say the same thing about Hina. I think this one will go down in price just because not as many decks are playing it moving forward, especially after Sakazuki gets banned. So if you're through playing black for the time being, I would personally unload these cards now, make yourself a little bit of money that way. Bringing up starter deck 4 again. I know we talked a lot about this one in the OPO 5 format due to the fact that a lot of these cards were pretty good in mono purple Luffy. However, that deck fell off pretty hard in OPO 6. Though I want to talk about Queen again because while purple Luffy still kind of dead in the water, not really doing anything, this is a card you can play in Law, and it's not necessarily a staple card, but it's kind of one of the more flex spots of cards you can play and that you might see players using, but it's kind of dependent on your personal preferences whether or not you play this card. There are only 23 listings left though, so people are still buying these. And again, if you want to be just set for whatever type of red purple Law deck might end up being the most relevant, you may want to have these in your collection if you don't. And I could definitely see these going up more again, so if you don't have them, it might be a good time to pick them up again. But we'll just have to wait and see. Again, I think the price of this card will be heavily influenced on if a red purple Law deck that wins, because I'm sure red purple Law is going to win some event in EBO 1, OPO 7. Are they running Queens? If they are, I think this card's going to go up quite a lot. If not, I think it'll probably stay about where it's at. Charlotte Linden's still very good in your NL deck, so despite the fact that Katakuri is kind of falling out of favor, this is still a card you're going to want to have in your collection if you're playing NL. May still even just be worth picking up a sealed starter deck at the price they're at right now versus buying these as singles. You're basically paying the same price for 2 Linlins as you are for the whole deck, which has 2 Linlins and then everything else down here, which while they don't have a lot of value, hey, maybe you'll need them someday. Ein from starter deck 5 is continuing to go up a little bit in price. It's not played in every red purple Law deck, but I definitely think the majority of red purple Law decks are playing 4 copies of Ein. So if you're playing red purple Law, you probably want this one. Hopefully you already had them, because $9 for this card is a little bit outrageous in my opinion. But starter deck 5 was one of those harder starter decks to pick up initially. They weren't very good when they released, but now, you know, cards like Ein are giving that starter deck quite a bit of value. I will say though, you get 4 copies of Ein in a starter deck, you know, that's almost $40 right there. The starter deck itself is $55, so if you need any of the other cards, maybe worth picking up a sealed one, but hopefully you just already have your Eins, because this is a bit outrageous in my opinion. Starter deck 10, you know, starter deck with red purple Law, we've been talking a lot about. Obviously your Trafalgar Law is a card that is played in some red purple Law decks. Definitely another one kind of like Queen, where it's like a flex choice. Sachi Penguin, however, is played in all of them, and there aren't a lot of listings of this card left because someone has tried to buy them all out. There was a point this week where the cheapest listing for this was like $7. Thankfully, they've dropped back down, and hopefully you have your Sachi Penguins. But just be mindful that there are some people out there right now who are trying to inflate the prices of not only the Law Leader, but some of those character cards as well that are very good in the deck. So hopefully you already have them, but if you don't, I might try and pick them up sooner rather than later, because again, with not many listings left, they can just keep buying them all out, and once they have the monopoly on the market, they kind of get to control where the price lands for cards like Sachi Penguin. Lastly, your Three Brothers stuff. Most of your alternate arts are calming down now. Luffy Leader obviously still being the most expensive and sought after, with Ace being not far behind, as I think this is a card that, you know, super good in your Black Yellow Luffy deck, but also is a card you can play in decks like NL pretty efficiently. A 5-cost 7k with Rush is pretty good, but I think it's one of the more kind of one of your flex slots for NL. Not all decks are running it, but you can. Similar thing with Sabo, seeing a lot of decks, NL decks running the Sabo, so could potentially see the alternate art for this one going up a little bit more, but for the most part things have settled down on these, which I think is pretty good to see. I know there was a lot of concern initially with people just scalping all the starter decks, which I did kind of happen, and making a bunch of money off of the alts, but you know, with 3 alts per pack, the prices on these are pretty reasonable. That just leaves us with our promo cards, which we'll get through pretty quick. Gordon's about 40 bucks right now, which is absurd, but like I said, Red Purple Law, you run 4 copies of this and Rise Mask most of the time. Maybe you could try and get away with only running 2, but you're going to need some number of copies of Gordon if you plan on playing Red Purple Law, which totally sucks because this card was not printed very heavily, was hard to get. You could only get it during the first month of the game. So unfortunately, this is kind of what you're stuck with, which for a card like Gordon feels absolutely absurd. It's not even an alternate art or anything. This is just the basic version of Gordon, the only one that's out there. Your 4-cost film pack Law, however, has dropped in price, and I'm very excited to see this because kind of one of the things I'd mentioned last week did end up coming true. For our Volume 7 tournament packs, which should be given out during tournament participation for events in the OP07 format, they're going to have the reprint of this card with a different artwork, which I'd argue is a lot better than this one, and it will also have a winner variant. So I think this is great because you can pick those cards up just for participating in events in OP07. With Red Purple Law being one of the more formidable decks in the format, I think it's great that players are going to be able to pick up a card like this just for participating in an event at their local game store. So I'm excited to see that the price on this one is dropping. However, if you are impatient and want to be playing Red Purple Law in EP01, unfortunately, this is what you're stuck with. We're not going to be getting those Volume 7 tournament packs at the very earliest towards the end of our EP01 format. So if you're not, if you want to play Red Purple Law, but you don't need to play it now, I would wait. Just pick up the alternate art when we get it in our Volume 7 tournament packs. You'll save yourself a little bit of money that way. And I think that the alternate art looks better than this action figure variant. For your Dawn cards, and especially for your the offline pack, which was your Volume 2 Dawn, a lot of these have gone up a little bit. Your online ones are a little bit cheaper, and I think this is because there were more of them out there. These were given out, I want to say, at 3-on-3 cups when they did those. Honestly, kind of hope those come back someday. They were also given out at some online treasure cups and whatnot as well, I think. But there were just more of these out there, I think. But I think they're all going up because these aren't being given out anymore, which sucks for people who are just getting into the game and want to pick these up. But it's kind of where we're at right now. The Celebration Dawn is also going up. This one got as low as about 37 bucks, but now only 8 listings left and 53 bucks a piece. Definitely going to be hard to get these moving forward. Year 5 Dawn at about 40, Gold Dawn at about 15. Your winter stuff, not a lot going on here. I think Kaya is still, if you're playing blue, you might want to pick these up just because it's the only alternate art version of Kaya. And once we kind of rotate out of this Volume 6 tournament packs, I could see this one going up a little bit more. Shirahoshi also very, very good, especially in decks like NL. But we've got other alternate art versions of Shirahoshi. We've got the Dash Pack version. We've got this version. And then we're essentially getting this version again, but textured in the Bandai Card Fest binder, which we'll be releasing sometime later this year. Kind of the same thing with Izo. Both very good cards, but they've got other alternate art variants either out or on the way. Bonnie, if you plan on playing Bonnie, of course, if you want to max variety your deck, you're going to need these. I think, the Supernova package in general just continue to get more and more support. makes Bonnie just a good card to pick up in general, but these celebration cards are rather expensive. So, you know, if you anticipate any of these cards being good, I might pick them up now, because we're probably never going to be able to get these championship cards again. You know, you got them during your Nats 2023, but I doubt we'll ever get these cards again. So whatever is out there is what's out there. We're not getting more of these. So as time goes on, I think these are just going to go up and up and up in price. Your event pack stuff, all pretty reasonable, to be honest. Your event pack Zoros are a little expensive in my opinion, especially considering this card doesn't see play. But because it doesn't see play, I don't think you need to pick it up right now. And over time, I think this one will go down a little bit in price once all of our, you know, event pack volume 3 cards are out. All the events that are giving these out are done. I think that's when these cards will be at their lowest. So if you need to have them, I would wait just a little bit longer. For judge stuff, your queens are up a little bit. So for quite a while, these were about the same price as the starter deck ones. We are finally starting to see a little bit of gap in these two now. Helmeppo is still a good card. Otama is still a good card, though it does have other alternate art variants now. Other than that, all your other judge cards are pretty cheap. Store championship stuff, for the most part, things are dropping, but we are seeing the Gecko Moria again, up a little bit higher than it was at one point. You know, the Warlord package is solid, but you know, those blue Warlord decks unfortunately aren't quite enough to keep up in the current metagame, I don't think. Maybe you'll see, like, you know, your Boa Hancock at the bottom end of tier 2 and OPO 7, but other than that, the Dofi deck did not make the comeback that some people were hoping. So I think this one will probably drop back down again, to be honest. I only got the championship cards brought up because, like I said, with Kuzan and Borsalino kind of falling out of favor, we could see kind of a mass sellout on the max rarity fiends who had picked these up prior, especially the people who picked them up when they were closer to $400, $1,000, whatever. But we'll just have to wait and see on that. It was kind of something I thought about, considering that these cards aren't seeing a lot of play moving forward. I'm not going to talk about stamp cards today because it was all about the same stuff we saw last week. So I don't want to kind of repeat everything I just said last week. So that leaves us with the last thing I have to say. Don't buy the pre-sales. EBO1 releases in just under a week now. Please don't buy the pre-sales. You know, this alternate art Bond Clay, it's not going to be $200, okay? This SR Chopper, it's not going to be $50. I don't know why people are buying it. I hope they're not real people and it's just people buying the card to buy the card. I want to say, like, this Kid Killer, lots of people were buying these at $5 a piece, $20 a piece. Don't buy the pre-sales. This is going to be like a 50-cent card once the set actually releases. Just be patient. Buy the pre-sales. You're not getting these cards any quicker if you buy the pre-sales either, because I can't ship them until release day. Just wait till release day. Prices will tank. You don't need to buy the pre-sales. That's all I've got to say about the pre-sales. I'm not going to keep ranting. Just please, for the love of God, do not buy the pre-sales. With all that said, thank you so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed, please do consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel if you've not done so already. Like I said, I got big plans for the channel kind of going into probably June. Maybe I'll start rolling them out a little closer to the end of May, but I've got some big plans. I hope you look forward to it. Content's going to be more consistent soon, and I hope you look forward to it. But again, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you all in the next video. Peace.